Grazie, Senor Presidente and Governor Brown. You seem to be here as the high priest to offer up prayers in praise of the cult of an anthropomorphic climate change at a time when what our economies desperately need is a Samson to pull down the pillars of the temple. President Trump seems to have been elected as that Samson. People are concerned about jobs and less concerned about climate change. And at the moment, you cannot get a government grant if you're a scientist if you do not subscribe to your cult of climate change. And it's been pointed out over the last 450 years that it's glaringly obvious that temperatures and CO2 are in inverse correlation at least as often as they are in semblance of correlation. And those aren't my words, they are those of the former president of Greenpeace, Patrick Moore. Though I'm sure people here will regard me as a heretic for suggesting that science is not settled on this matter, but as recently as 2007, even the IPCC warned that we should not recognise that we are dealing with a coupled, non-linear, chaotic system, and therefore the long-term prediction of future climate states is simply not possible. Isn't it a wee bit arrogant of the scientific community to postulate that mankind has more impact than solar activity? I believe that the Martian ice works in lockstep with the movement of ice cores or ice on Earth, and there are no cars on Mars. It may be that it's something more to do with the sun. It could be done to many other things, but not just CO2. And the learned of the day wanted to burn Galileo, and the majority are simply no means omniscient, simply because of the majority. And I worry about the ordinary people who are going to be losing their jobs, because we haven't proved that CO2 is the problem, and it's simply become a cult for big business to make money. Thank you, sir.
Now that brings me to the denialists in the room. And I have to always say I think you folks, British, I think you're British folk. You have great education. You've obviously learned the King's English quite well, but you're dead wrong. And the crocodile tears you shed for the poor are not convincing, not convincing at all. In fact, the people who are Please. We need to respect our guest, please. Hey, I don't know that I was referring to you. I was speaking to mostly the gentleman over here, but I can include you as well. Because there's so many little bits of rhetoric that have been deposited on this table here that to swat them all down and respond and comment intelligently it's more complicated than just giving one little expression. So you people have all talked, and now I get to talk back. And I must say that we have here the diversity that we have in the world. That's the way it is. The diversity in the United States, we have great disagreement. How are we ever going to resolve it? We will resolve it with a majority vote. And that is very much the challenge before us, because there is great disagreement. And I've been saying, and others have too, that we're not on track to do what we have to do. So forging the sufficient consensus going forward is going to be quite difficult. And I think the people who spoke in opposition to any kind of serious climate action. Now, the comment that it's a cult, that the scientists that do represent the majority of climate scientists who tell about the anthropogenic impact and causation, this is real. And you can criticize the IPCC report and say all the scientists are on the payroll, but the truth is that any kind of catalog of the scientific community indicates that climate change is real, it's having impacts, and the prediction will have even greater impacts going forward. So that's something I think I'm not going to convince you, because you have your own perspective and your belief. But I'm very happy that you express it, because it indicates the problems that we have in the United States, in Europe and the rest of the world. And that's why it's touch and go. Will we be able to deal with it? So I'm convinced that the science, the overwhelming science, the modeling, the measurement, the hottest days on record. I don't know if you have to go back and recite all the evidence. I think it's pretty overwhelming. Even the Trump administration couldn't, with a straight face, curb a report that underscores the very opposite of what you denialists have expressed here. So even the Trump people have to put out a scientific report because it was an honest report. These are credentialed, serious, respected scientists, and they're telling us exactly what the IPCC has said, only that has underestimated where we are. So we'll continue to have these disputes, but luckily I think the climate denial is a receding perspective, certainly around this room and even in the United States. Interesting enough, with the denialists getting more attention, the people, instead of growing in their skepticism, are growing in their conviction that climate change and global warming are real matters, and we have to deal with them. With respect to some of the completely opposite point of view about farm animals and not eating meat, I will say that the generation of methane that comes from some of the farming industry, as well as other places, is very serious. And I think we have to do something about curbing the short-lived climate pollutants, which are methane, black carbon, chlorofluorocarbon. These have much more impact, but they're shorter-lived. And if we can reduce these short-lived climate emissions, we will give more time to deal with the reduction of CO2. But in terms of picking, a hamburger or, a pickup truck, how we deal with climate change is a matter that I don't think it's helpful to try to specify each initiative that may be taken. I think we create overall goals, and based on the overall goal, we then reduce the emissions by sector. And certainly the transportation sector. Aviation has been mentioned, not adequately addressed. Shipping the same way. We have to go at it in a systematic way, in a general way, and not people will make their own dietary choices. But I would say if we build the consensus and we have real enforceable goals and mandates, and we bring down the emissions at the level that we have to meet a zero emission result by 2050 or sooner, we will find different ways, giving people the opportunity to work their way through this constraint. But it's not a matter of putting on a hair shirt or some radical abstinence. The fact is that the innovation is quite elegant, and we're able to get more with less stuff. The throughput needed to produce a given amount of industrial good is going down because of the increase of information as opposed to raw material. And we are able to make our imprint, our footprint lighter because of innovation, because of new technology, because of scientific breakthroughs that have been created. I go back to California. We are reducing our greenhouse gases. We have the most aggressive climate programs in the country, and yet our economy is growing faster than the national average. Just since the last recession, California has created approximately 2.5 million new jobs. So it's an engine, and through intelligence and through insight, we can adjust the human impact on the planet. Not easy, not done overnight, and not done without wide and deep consensus. We're not going to shove anything down people's throats. We're going to, through a democratic process, achieve the goals that we've set for ourselves. That is if we're lucky and we can get it all together. Certainly carbon subsidies should be cut out, period. No question about that. The trading questions, there is a disruption in trade. For example, auto workers in America made $20, $30 an hour, and in Mexico the same automobile companies can pay $1.50 an hour, $1.50. Well, this is quite disruptive. So working that through is a big challenge. We don't want to pull up, create barriers, but we have to create a world that works for all of us. I want to say in that respect, however, the people who say don't do a damn thing about climate change, the people who are going to pay are not the rich, not the people who may not be rich but can come into a room like this. They're not going to be they're going to be able to fend much better than the billions of people who are going to be the number one sufferers. So the social impact of following this carbon path will be to exacerbate the gap between the more affluent and the desperate and the starving, which already exceeds hundreds and hundreds of millions. So we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to get this thing wrong. The consequences are civilizational in impact. If we don't figure out the right path, it's going to make our societies less governable, and we're going to have all the problems of a warming climate, which is reduced agricultural productivity, increased spread of tropical diseases. It's going to be rising sea level. It's happening. The warmest 20 years, last 20 have been the warmest 18 in any recorded history. We know the greenhouse gases, CO2, 403 parts per million. We haven't seen that in millions of years, and it's going up. And we don't know that 2% is going to be adequate. Maybe 1.5%. And a lot of uncertainty. Somebody said that there's uncertainty. You bet there's uncertainty. So we want to just err. We want to say all these scientists, okay, we don't believe them. Let's just full speed ahead. And what? That's a very risky operation. And I would say this, that the power of humankind, the power of nanotechnology, genetic engineering, nuclear power, nuclear weaponry, all sorts of industrial processes. Human beings are generating more power on the part of more people. 1 billion cars. It was only 30 years ago we had 300 million cars. So we have more power, more technology. That curve is going up in a straight line. The curve of power. And that power can be lethal and destructive. On the other hand, the curve, if we plot it, of wisdom and insight and self-restraint, it's totally flat. And so that gap's getting bigger. That's why the former royal scientist Martin Rees from Great Britain says the chance of humanity making it through the 21st century is 50% at best. So these are real serious matters that we have to reflect on. And all the individual actions become so profoundly important. We have to build a consensus. We've got to take the practical steps, and we've got to get it done in a very short amount of time. COP23 is an important next step. I was in Rio in 1992 when the framework on climate change was first articulated, and there was this great deal of optimism. And now here we are all these years later, we're still fighting about it. Some countries aren't doing very much. And the data, the scientific understanding continues to mount. And so there we are. Humanity is on the chopping block. How are we going to make it forward? And I don't even think climate change, it's not our only problem. As I mentioned, I'd like to warn everybody that it only takes 2 minutes to launch a nuclear bomb that will then set in motion who knows what. So the perils are many. The rewards are also great. We're able to produce so much wealth that it may just set us off on a certain level of complacency. We may think everything's okay because it looks okay in this room. Well, it's not okay. We're on a track to destruction if we don't turn back. And the Paris Agreement was a major step in the right direction in pulling back and redirecting our energies. COP23 is the next step, and there'll be COP24 and so on. So my appeal here is we've got to take seriously the science. We have to take seriously the reasonable next step. And I think if we do, we can create a world that will work better than the world is working now, and certainly better than the world will work if we follow the recommendation of those who would say, forget it, it's not a problem. I don't agree with that. I think it's a huge problem, and I think we have answers. We're going to need technological breakthroughs. We're going to need batteries that are far cheaper and far more efficient. We're going to need hydrogen cars that are a lot cheaper than are currently today, and all sorts of other things. That's where our goal should be. We have a lot of activities. We have a lot of things that we're paying attention to. We're spending a lot of money on entertainment and worrying about which teams are winning and who said what to who. Humanity is on the chopping block. And this group around here has a level of knowledge and power and responsibility to do something about it. So my appeal is that I know we can combine green action with economic progress, but we can't do it without great scientific insight, without wisdom, and without collaboration. So that's my pitch today. You're doing a lot in the EU, more than we're doing in the U.S. as a whole. Maybe not more than California is doing, but we all can do more. And we will do more if we think and open ourselves to the truth, if we get serious about real problems and not a lot of the nonsense that we spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about. This is not a time for complacency or inertia. It's a time for bold, creative, imaginative action. And the EU is a key leader in whether we make it or not. The EU will influence other countries and certainly America. So I came here because you are doing a tremendous amount. It's not everybody's going to agree, but it's pretty damn good. So now let's keep it going and not flag and get discouraged because, we're eating the wrong diet or we're not making the right cars or whatever. There's a lot of ways to get to the goal, and there will be ways to solve many of the problems, and we have to do it in a political way. So you're going to have to win the constituents. This is a democracy. We can't just order it up. So we do have to be convincing, and we have to convince ourselves to go even further. And that's really my final point here. In fact, it's my only point. We got to do more. We can do more. And right here is a very powerful group of people that can be instrumental in making sure the world gets on the right path and stays on the right path. Thank you.
Mr. Governor,